Hi everybody, my name is Mr. Francy and welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Today we are going to be, I'm going to be doing a video that kind of came up last week when I was doing my check-in for the goals that I set for myself and my progress in the first quarter of 2022. A goal came up that I had completely forgotten about, but I made sure to write it down so many times that I would not forget it, and now I get to present it to you today. I am going to tell you my 3 favourite and my 3 non-favourite books for the first quarter of 2022. So grab your snacks, grab a nice drink, and spread that sparkly energy around the world as I welcome you back to Mr. Francy Reads! Yes, welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads, and hello to everyone. Of all the books that I've read so far this year, in the first quarter of 2022, I have 3 books that have stood out as being my favourite, and 3 books that have stood out for being my least favourite. We will also do some honourable and dishonourable mentions along the way. But before I go any further, if you have not already subscribed, please do so. It really does help my channel. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers, so if you can help me out, that would be awesome. And also, while you're down there, hit that notification bell, ding, so that you can be notified each and every time I do upload a video. Alright, you guys, we're going to start with the negatives because it's always better to end on a positive note. Don't you agree? These are my bottom 3 books that I read in the first quarter of 2022 with some dishonourable mentions that I will bring up along the way. Okay, so coming in at 3rd place, my bronze medal goes to a book that I don't have on me because I borrowed it from the library. And that book is this book, Death by Chocolate Malted Milkshake by Sarah Graves. This is book number 2 in the Death by Chocolate series. It's an adult cozy mystery series, and I gave it a low rating. I don't remember what I rated exactly, but I gave it a low rating, and here's why. This series is pegged as a culinary cozy series, and I don't know if I agree. In case you don't know, culinary cozies are, or culinary as a genre, culinary fiction, is a genre of fiction that predominantly discusses food and cooking. The key word here, and one of the reasons why I will not continue on with this series, is predominantly. While this book does feature cooking here and there, in fact our protagonist and her dear best friend run a chocolate bakery called Moose, which is wonderful and is a great setup for the series. There's not a whole bunch of cooking involved. In fact, in a couple of scenes, both in books 1 and 2, cooking kind of happens while important discussions are happening, so we miss out on what is actually going on with the cooking. It's more, this is just an example, but it's more set up in a way of, so Ellie White and I grabbed the flour as we began to make the cake, and we discussed the case, and the next thing you're going to hear about cooking is when she goes, so the cake was done, and we miss the rest. When I go into a culinary book, I want to be able to sense everything that's going on with the culinary experience. Whether you are talking about food that you are seeing, hearing, eating, feeling, tasting, whatever it is, or even cooking, I want to feel like I'm there experiencing that food, those dishes, the cooking with you. And I just did not get that from this series. Coming in for my silver medal for the 2nd worst book that I read would have to be this book. Class Reunions Are Murder by Libby Klein. This is another adult cozy book, and I, again, don't remember what I gave it. I think I gave it 3 stars, but I probably could have given it less. Let me explain. This book did something that I find very hard to deal with, and that is when you have characters that are too offensive. So this book deals with fat shaming, And it's just not something that I appreciated at all. At one point, our protagonist is kind of forcibly sent to a nutritionist to change her diet, and the nutritionist basically tells her off for the lifestyle that she's been leading and stuff like that. It just did not work for me. That is not the only thing that comes up in this book, but that was offensive enough for me to be affected by the book in the wrong way. I think if people want to go on a diet, if they want to change their eating habits or their lifestyle or whatever, that should be up to them. No one should be forced into doing it because others are shaming them, putting them down, ridiculing them, anything like that. So this book did that, and that just really, really annoyed me. Also, what I didn't appreciate about this book is there were so many characters that were thrown at us at once, that when the reveal of the mystery came to light, instead of going, oh, yay, it was this one, or oh no, I wish it was not that one, my reaction was, who? I'm sorry, who are you? I don't remember you, and that's never a good thing. So now it's time for me to give you some dishonourable mentions. And the first dishonourable mention that I'm going to give is this book, The Vampire Knitting Club by Nancy Warren. Yes, by Nancy Warren. There are two elements, in my opinion, to a cozy mystery, and those are the two words in the genre. There is the cozy side and there is the mystery side. I really want to enjoy both sides for me to be able to give a cozy mystery 5 stars. The cozy side of this book is we have a protagonist who is running her grandmother's knitting shop, which really intrigued me because I've never read anything to do with yarn as a profession before in a cozy mystery, and so I was really, really, really excited about it. But the yarn and the knitting and all that type of experience, it really didn't come up enough at all, and that just incredibly let me down. Another dishonourable mention for me is going to be a book that some people really love, but it just didn't work for me. And that is this book, To Helvetica and Back by Paige Shelton. So just like with The Vampire Knitting Club, book number 1, The Vampire Knitting Club, this book is just a dishonourable mention. It's not high enough for me to give it a medal, but it deserves the mention because it wasn't a book that I loved. Again, this comes back to the cozy aspect. So with the cozy aspect, we are following a woman who runs a restoration place where she restores old typewriters to make them look brand new, as well as really old books. It just did not work for me. Unfortunately, To Helvetica and Back did what I wanted the Vampire Knitting Club to do. We spent a ton of time at our protagonist's profession, and because the profession did not interest me at all, it did really let me down. But if you thought that was bad, those were only my dishonourable mentions as well as my bronze and silver medal. Now let's get to the gold. Coming in at number 1, the single worst book that I read for the first quarter of 2022 was this book, Glazed Murder by Jessica Beck. Before I go any further, Jessica Beck is a pen name for a male author by the name of Tim Myers. Now, I gave this book 2 stars, which is the lowest rating that I've given any single book in 2022. Every other book aside from this book received 3 stars or more. So this was by far and away the worst book that I read in 2022. And I'm going to tell you why. Again, it is going to come back to the same situation as the Vampire Knitting Academy, in that the cozy side extremely let me down, and I was so looking forward to the cozy side of this, not only this book, but the entire series as a whole. This series is called the Donut Shop Mystery Series, and I mean, when I heard that there was a Donut Shop Cozy Mystery Series, my first reaction was, oh my goodness, I am there. Can you imagine being in a donut shop for a cozy mystery series? How amazing is that? Unfortunately, once again, I do feel that the series, as well as the theme, it was not accurately named, because the donut shop is there. The protagonist of this series runs her own independent donut shop. Yeah, so we can tick that off. But the donut shop more serves as a background to the story as opposed to something that we actually get to experience. Don't get me wrong, we do get to learn a little bit here and there, but 85% of this cozy mystery was a mystery, and I really don't understand what made it so cozy at all, and I definitely don't understand what makes this a donut shop mystery other than the fact that our protagonist works at a donut shop and so it's there in the background. It's definitely not in the foreground, and that did extremely let me down. What also extremely let me down is this is the first cozy that I picked up that was written by a male author, and this is an area in writing that is usually dominated by women. Now, I have no problem with that. I'm a very big feminist, but I believe in equality all across the board. It is predominantly done by women cozy mysteries, to the point where our male author Tim Myers used his pen name Jessica Beck because that's kind of the done thing. It's a women-dominated field, so he decided to use a pen name that was a female pen name. It just all completely let me down, unfortunately. It was definitely not the book for me. I'm not continuing on with the series, and for all the hype that I myself had over this series, it just let me down even more. So the gold medal for the single worst book that I read in the first quarter of 2022, without a doubt, goes to this book, Glazed Murder by Jessica Beck, aka Tim Myers. Let's take a look at the books that impressed me. I have more honourable mentions in the favourites section, but of course I also have my bronze, silver and gold medals to hand out. So let's get right to it, shall we, as I tell you my favourite books that I read for the first quarter of 2022. Coming in at number 3, the bronze medal goes to this book, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is an adult classic, and I gave this book an overwhelming 5 stars. So this is the first time that I've ever read Agatha Christie. I was a little bit reserved because it's a classic, you never know what you're gonna get. But this book was so entertaining for me from start to end. Before I go any further, I have to say this. If you are a fan of Clue, whether it be the game or the books or the film, you will love this book. So if you're a fan of any of those aspects of Clue, pick up this book, you won't be disappointed. This book is an omniscient narration book where we are following 10 different characters. We follow these 10 because at some point, these 10, they're gonna die. Is that a spoiler? Usually, but not for this book. We find that out very early on. All 10 of these victims are invited to a secluded island called Soldier Island, and when they arrive there, one thing they all find in common is in their own separate guest rooms is a framed work of a nursery rhyme called 10 Little Soldiers. 10 Little Soldiers is a nursery rhyme that dictates 10 different ways that 10 different soldiers met their demise. And these characters follow suit in dying in the same way. The question becomes, why are they dying in this same way? How is this being pulled off? Clearly, someone is making this happen. It's not just a coincidence. Very big shout out to Jane from the Reading Nook, who has set me in the right direction. I know that I have a lot more Agatha Christie's that I'm going to be picking up very, very soon. The silver medal goes to a book that is not going to surprise anyone who has been following me at least this year. So, take a second, let's see if you can guess the book or the series. 3, 2, 1, here we go, let's see if you were right. The silver medal goes to Assaulted Caramel by Amanda Flower. I think if anyone's surprised at this, they'll be more surprised that it's the silver medal as opposed to the gold. I don't think anyone's really going to be surprised that this book and also the series, because I'm counting the series as a whole, I'm just having book 1 represent it, made it onto this list. Assaulted Caramel is the first book in the Amish Candy Shop series, and this is the first cozy mystery series that I have read 5 books, 4 standard novels, and 1 novella in the series, and they've all received either 4 or 5 stars from me. I love this series so much that my goal is to have 1 book from this series on my TBR every single month. That's how much I love it. It definitely deserved to be here. The long and short of the very first book, Assaulted Caramel, is that we're following a woman by the name of Bailey King, who ends up going back home to Amish country. Bailey is not Amish, her grandparents are, and her grandfather is deathly ill. Her grandparents run a candy shop. She is a famous chocolatier from New York City, so she goes there to help out her grandmother while her grandpa is dealing with all the health issues that he is dealing with. Well, At some point, a murder happens. Bailey has to investigate what is going on. It is amazing. If you love culinary fictions done well, I highly recommend this book. Alright, let's do some honourable mentions, shall we? I put one book instead of the entire series into the first honourable mention, but I need to show you all of the books because I really don't see how one would stand out above any of the others for me. My first honourable mention goes to The Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyer. I'm holding up 3 books because I've only read 3 so far. I'm reading the 4th book, Breaking Dawn, this month. I love this series so very much. The world building is incredible. So long story short, in this series we are following a girl by the name of Bella Swan. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot her name. By the name of Bella Swan, who ends up having to move from the state that her mother lives in to live with her father, who mum and dad are divorced. And while she is in that state, she attends the high school. On her first day there, she meets a guy who is absolutely compelling. She doesn't know why. She finds out very early on, this is not a spoiler because it's the setup for the series, that he is in fact a vampire. The vampire's name is Edward Cullen, and the old friend she had from childhood, his name is Jacob Black. Jacob Black, it turns out, is a werewolf. We learn so much about Stephanie Meyer's made-up world of vampires and so much about Stephanie Meyer's made-up world of werewolves that it just intrigues me from start to end. Whether it was Twilight, New Moon, or Eclipse, I loved all of these books. Legend by Marie Lu. This is a YA dystopian book that I gave 5 stars to. It's the first dystopian that I read this year, and Marie Lu did something so incredible when it comes to my idea of what I love about dystopians. In this world, we are following 2 characters. It is dual perspective. We follow June and Day. In this world, to keep it simple, there are 2 class systems, the rich and the poor. June is from the rich class and Day is from the poor class. So we literally get the best from both worlds. The setup for the series, and certainly the setup for this book, is that when children in this world turn a certain age, they take a test that is going to determine the rest of their life. Day is the rebel for the poor class. He wants to change things, but in order to be able to do that, he needs to break certain laws that the rich class don't abide by. Will he succeed, and how will June factor into it? The first book was incredible. I can't wait to get on to the next one. My next honourable mention would have to be Double Double Tartan Trouble by Samantha Silva. This is book 2 in the in the Spellford Cove series. Book 1 is right here, The Witching Flower. So the premise of book 1, The Witching Flower, is that we're following a girl by the name of Robin who receives a letter to let her know that her blood birth mother has died and bequeathed her a bakery shop that she was running. Her aunt wrote the letter to her and asked her if she could just come down, check out the bakery and work out what she wants to do. Robin comes down and decides that she is going to stay and run the bakery. While she's there, she finds out that there is more to her than meets the eye. Robin is a witch, and the type of witch she is a kitchen witch, which means her powers include being able to use her magic to infuse her magic into the food that she cooks to make it even more incredible, to make the food have a powerful effect on those who eat them in a really good way. And book 2 was even more paranormal than book 1, so I loved it even more. I highly recommend Spellford Cove to anyone who loves paranormal cozies. My final honourable mention for favourite books of first quarter of 2022 would have to be an unpopular opinion. Murder is Binding by Lorna Barrett. Not everyone that I have seen that has read this book have said that they loved it, but I did. This is book 1 in the Booktown series, Booktown Mystery series. And the premise of this book is that we're following a woman by the name of Trisha, who runs a mystery bookstore in a town that has as many bookstores as there are genres that specifically cater to that genre. So she runs the mystery one, then there's a bookstore next door that is the cookbook store, then there are other bookstores, there's a fantasy one, a sci-fi one, a contemporary one. Oh my goodness, can I just jump into the book and visit this town? I tell you what, I'd probably be buying 100 books from each store, but anyway. I mean, that was enough to get me intrigued, but I'll tell you this. The mystery was so good. The cozy side was amazing. It is my personal opinion. The book is polarizing. Some people love it, some don't. But it was definitely the book for me. Alright, everyone. It is time for me to tell you my #1 favorite book that I read in the first quarter of 2022. This book blew me away from start to end. I had no idea what I was getting into with this book. And in fact, this book wasn't even originally on my TBR. I needed an extra book because I was doing my Cozied Up with Mr. Francy readathon. We had a bingo card with prompts. I had a book that I had put up on my TBR for that prompt. It turned out that book didn't fit that prompt, so I had to find a book that did. I was looking for an arts and crafts cozy. So I ended up asking for suggestions, and this series was suggested to me. This series starts off with a novella. So I decided to read the novella first so that I knew what I was getting into before reading book 1. That novella blew me away, and it definitely deserves the gold medal. The book that receives the gold medal from me for the single best book that I read in the first quarter of 2022 is this book, Tangles and Treason by Nancy Warren, book 0.5 in the Vampire Knitting Club series. Now, isn't it interesting that the Vampire Knitting Club, book 1 in the Vampire Knitting Club series, ended up being on my worst list, while this book became the best one. It's not unheard of. I've had this happen with the likes of Caraval and the second book in the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber, and it's happened here again. But let's focus on the positives because this book is the gold medal book. This book, this novella, was just so wonderful. As someone who has gotten back into reading the Twilight Saga, as I mentioned recently, I was really excited to see how an author would take vampires into a cozy mystery and make that work. This novella was written a number of years after a certain amount of the standard books had come out, and I think this book was written to explain a bit of the backstory from one of the characters that props up, at least in book 1 that I've read so far. And explains, because it is the Vampire Knitting series, explains how he went from being human to becoming a vampire. If you love vampire stories, if you love historical fiction, if you've ever dreamt that one day you would read a historical vampire novella that is going to blow your mind, this is the one you've been waiting for. I did not have a single lull in this book. There was not one moment where I was thinking, oh gosh, we just need to get past this part because I know the good part is coming. The good part was every single moment in this book. It was so well done. And I think that's why I was let down so much by book 1 in the series, because the novella was just so fantastic. But there we go. Those are all of the books that I wanted to mention that were my faves and least faves for the first quarter of 2022. What were your top 3 faves and bottom 3 non-faves for the first quarter of 2022? Let me know in the comment section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it, letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Be kind, love one another, and spread that sparkling energy all throughout the world. And of course, until next time, happy reading!